Yeah, how do you put someone in jail and you don't even name the clients? That sounds kind of insane. A lot of people that met with him and did business with him and traveled with him after he was arrested.
Gluttony, very close, so bad. Who created this book? Epstein.
Grateful to be joined by Jeffrey Epstein survivor Annie Farmer. Annie, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show.
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related.
What if I told you that one of the most trusted women in media keeps appearing on the edges of one of the darkest scandals in modern history? Not accused, not charged, but always nearby. When Joe Rogan started talking about the newly released Jeffrey Epstein files, he didn't name names recklessly. He didn't make wild accusations, but he did ask one uncomfortable question. Why do the same powerful figures keep showing up in these circles? And suddenly, one name started trending everywhere. Oprah Winfrey. Now let's be clear. Rogan never accused Oprah of a crime, but he did highlight something bigger. Power, access, reputation, and how elite networks protect their own. Because here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Epstein wasn't just a predator. He was a connector, a middleman, a gatekeeper to rooms filled with billionaires, like presidents, royalty, scientists, and celebrities. So the real question isn't, did Oprah do something? The real question is, how did Epstein stay welcome in powerful circles for so long? And why does this story still feel unfinished? Let's break it down. When people hear the name Jeffrey Epstein, they picture a monster operating in the shadows. But that's not how he operated. He didn't hide in dark basements. He hosted dinner parties. He sat at tables with Nobel Prize winners. He met with billionaires. He posed in photos with royalty. And that's what makes this so disturbing. Because predators don't survive in elite spaces without protection. They survive because they borrow credibility. And that's where this gets complicated. When Joe Rogan talked about the files, he didn't scream conspiracy. He said something far more unsettling. He said being listed in a contact book doesn't prove guilt. It proves proximity. And proximity is power. Think about it. If you're a scientist, a politician, a celebrity, and you walk into a room where everyone else is respected, you assume the host must be legitimate. That's how social proof works. Epstein built a room where everyone validated everyone else. You see a former president? Must be safe. You see a tech billionaire? Must be normal. You see media royalty? Must be fine. And suddenly, the man in the center looks untouchable. This is called reputation laundering, and Epstein mastered it. After his 2008 conviction, he didn't disappear. He reinvented himself. He donated money to universities. He funded scientific research. He attached himself to humanitarian causes. Why? Because money buys access. Access buys credibility. And credibility buys silence. And this is where the public gets uneasy. Because some people didn't just meet him before his conviction, they continued interacting with him after. That's the detail that hits different. Now, here's where the internet jumps. When documents get released and powerful names appear in flight logs or contact books, the public reaction is immediate. Why were they there? Did they know? Were they ignoring red flags? And when a name like Oprah Winfrey trends in that conversation, emotions spike instantly. Not because there's proof of wrongdoing, but because trust is involved. Oprah isn't just a celebrity. She represents moral authority to millions. She built a brand around empathy, empowerment, and accountability. So when her name appears anywhere near a scandal like this, even loosely, it hits differently. And that's what Rogan was really pointing at. Not guilt. Power structures. He questioned why elite circles are so small, why the same names rotate through the same rooms, why wealthy, influential people often socialize within tightly controlled networks. Because once you're inside that circle, scrutiny changes. People assume safety, they assume legitimacy, they assume someone else did the vetting, and that assumption? That's where predators thrive. Epstein didn't need to convince the world he was credible. He just needed a handful of powerful people to treat him like he was. And that illusion did the rest. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself this. If you were a rising academic, an up-and-coming celebrity, a foundation executive, and you were invited to a dinner filled with respected elites, would you question the host? Or would you assume someone else already did? That's the psychological trap. And Rogan's bigger warning wasn't, "This person is guilty." It was, "Elite culture protects itself. It moves in private. It networks in silence. And when something goes wrong, accountability becomes blurry. Because suddenly, nobody knew anything, nobody saw anything, nobody asked questions. But everyone was there, and that contradiction is what keeps this story alive. Not a single name, not one photo, not one document. The pattern of proximity, the pattern of power insulating itself, the pattern of silence after exposure. And the public? They're left staring at thousands of pages of documents thinking, how did this man stay welcome in those rooms? And that question? That's bigger than any single celebrity. Because if reputation can shield someone like Epstein, who else benefits from the same system? That's where we're going next. Now here's where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because this isn't about one photo, it's not about one email, it's not about one appearance. It's about a pattern people think they see. And when the internet thinks it sees a pattern, it doesn't whisper, it roars. When Joe Rogan brought up the Epstein files, he wasn't targeting Oprah Winfrey. But once her name started trending, the discussion shifted. Not to, is she guilty, but to, why does she keep crossing paths with controversial figures? And that question hits differently, because Oprah's brand isn't neutral. It's moral authority. For decades, she positioned herself as a truth teller, a cultural compass, a voice for survivors, a gatekeeper of integrity. So when you look back through history and see her proximity to powerful men who later fell from grace, the internet starts connecting dots. Now let's slow down. Proximity is not proof. Hollywood is small. Elite circles are tight. Influence overlaps constantly. But here's what fuels suspicion. Repeated association with powerful figures who later become scandal headlines. Names like Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, Sean Diddy Combs. At different moments in time, each of them sat comfortably inside mainstream industry respectability. Red carpets, award shows, television appearances. And Oprah, like many others in media, interacted publicly with some of them before their scandals exploded. Now here's where perception turns into narrative. When multiple controversial names intersect with one trusted figure over decades, some people see coincidence, others see a pattern. And patterns make people uncomfortable, because it forces a bigger question. Does elite culture normalize behavior until it becomes impossible to ignore? Remember, before Weinstein was convicted, he was celebrated. Before R. Kelly's convictions, he was a Grammy-winning superstar. Before allegations against others surfaced, they were industry titans. At the time, association wasn't suspicious. It was normal. But hindsight rewrites everything. And the internet loves hindsight. Suddenly, old photos feel sinister. Old interviews feel calculated. Old praise feels questionable. And the narrative becomes, were people ignoring warning signs? Now here's the key distinction. There is no verified evidence that Oprah was involved in Epstein's crimes. None. But the debate isn't about proof. It's about optics. And optics shape public trust. When documents show that powerful elites continued interacting with Jeffrey Epstein after his 2008 conviction, people don't just ask who, they ask why. Why was he still invited? Why was he still welcomed? Why did his money still circulate? Why did institutions still open doors? And if someone's brand is built on integrity, the public expects heightened scrutiny. That's the tension. It's not accusation, it's expectation. And that expectation is what makes Oprah's name trend harder than most. Because when a controversial financier moves in wealthy circles, people shrug. When a billionaire does it, people debate. But when a cultural icon associated with morality appears near that orbit, people react emotionally. Trust amplifies suspicion. And this is where Rogan's larger point becomes interesting. He wasn't saying, here's the evidence. He was saying, why does power insulate itself? Why do elite networks recycle the same names? Why does accountability feel selective? Why do institutions accept money from controversial figures? And why does it take public outrage for consequences to appear? That's the real discussion. The Oprah debate becomes symbolic. It represents something bigger. The discomfort of realizing that powerful circles are smaller than we thought. That media, academia, tech, royalty, politics, they overlap. They dine together. They fund each other. They vouch for each other. And when one person falls, everyone nearby gets re-examined. Fair or not? Now pause. Here's the question I want you to think about. If you operate inside elite networks for decades, is it possible to avoid crossing paths with people who later turn out to be corrupt? Or does proximity come with the territory? That's the tension that keeps this alive. Not a smoking gun. Not a confession. A pattern of association that the public is now looking at differently. And the more documents that get released, the more people start revisiting old relationships. Not just Oprah, everyone. And that's where this escalates next. Because this isn't just about one media icon. It's about how Epstein rebuilt himself after his first arrest. And how institutions, not just individuals, played a role. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2006. He pleaded guilty in 2008. He was officially labeled a sex offender. That should have been the end. Career over, access revoked, doors closed. But that's not what happened. He didn't disappear. He rebranded. And that's what makes this story so disturbing. Because after his conviction was public knowledge, he still managed to re-enter elite spaces. How? Simple. Money, influence. And something even more powerful. Intellectual credibility. Instead of throwing wild parties, Epstein started hosting salons, private dinners, invite-only discussions, scientists, economists, tech founders, philanthropists. He pivoted from flashy to intellectual, from financier to patron of ideas. He funded research, donated to universities, associated with respected institutions. And here's the key. When respected institutions accept your money, they validate you. That validation becomes a shield. And shields are powerful, because once a university, a foundation, or a well-known figure treats someone as legitimate, other people lower their guard. It's psychological. If MIT takes money from someone, people assume someone vetted him. If major foundations accept meetings, people assume due diligence happened. If powerful names continue attending dinners, people assume the scandal must have been handled. This is how reputation laundering works. You don't erase your past, you bury it under credibility. Now this is where Joe Rogan made an important point. He didn't focus on conspiracy, he focused on elite psychology. Why did people keep interacting with Epstein after 2008? Was it greed, status, denial? Or something darker, the belief that powerful people operate by different rules? Because once you're wealthy enough, scandals don't remove you from rooms. They just change the lighting. And that's terrifying. Now think about this. If you're an academic invited to a private dinner filled with respected intellectuals, you see Nobel Prize winners, you see billionaires, you see media figures. Are you going to be the one person who says, "Wait, wasn't this guy convicted?" Or are you going to assume someone else already handled it? That's diffusion of responsibility. Everyone assumes someone else asked the hard questions. And when everyone assumes that, no one actually does. That's how Epstein rebuilt. Not through secrecy, through normalization. And normalization is more dangerous than hiding, because it makes the abnormal feel ordinary. Now let's bring this back to the larger conversation. When powerful names appear in contact books, flight logs, meeting schedules, it doesn't automatically mean guilt, but it does raise something else. Institutional failure. Because Epstein didn't sneak into those circles alone. He was invited, re-invited, hosted, tolerated. And that tolerance is what people are reacting to now. Not just individuals, institutions, universities, foundations, media networks, elite social circles. And once you zoom out, the question shifts from who is guilty to how did this ecosystem allow him back in? That's a much bigger conversation. And it's uncomfortable because it doesn't target one villain. It questions the entire system. Now here's where this gets even more unsettling. After Epstein's second arrest in 2019, people looked back and realized the warning signs were already there. The conviction was already public. The red flags weren't hidden, they were ignored. And when you realize that, trust erodes, because it suggests power can override reputation damage. If you're rich enough, connected enough, useful enough, you can re-enter the room. And that's the part the public struggles to accept, because we're told justice is blind. But elite networking? It has excellent vision. It knows exactly who is valuable. And that's what Rogan was hinting at. Not, here's a secret list. But, why do elite circles protect access so fiercely? Why does money reopen doors? Why do institutions accept controversial donors? Why are powerful people so reluctant to distance themselves from toxic figures until public pressure forces them? That's the deeper thread. And it's why this story doesn't fade. Because it's not just about crimes, it's about credibility and how easily it can be manufactured. Now here's where it escalates. Because right before Epstein died, reports suggest there were conversations about cooperation. And that possibility changes everything. Because if he was going to talk, who had something to lose? By 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was no longer hiding behind donations or dinner parties. He was arrested again, this time federally, this time under national scrutiny, this time with cameras everywhere. And here's the detail that keeps this story alive. There were reported discussions about cooperation, not confirmed deals, not signed agreements, but conversations. Legal discussions about resolution, about possibility, about cooperation. Now pause. If someone like Epstein, a man who moved inside elite networks for years, starts cooperating, that's not a small development, that's seismic. Because cooperation doesn't just expose crimes, it exposes relationships. Who knew what? Who visited? Who funded? Who ignored? Who benefited? And that's where the public imagination explodes. Now let's be clear. There is no confirmed, publicly released cooperation agreement showing Epstein formally became an informant before his death. There is no official list of names he handed over. But here's what fuels suspicion. Timing. Epstein was arrested July 2019. Within weeks, reports indicate discussions about potential cooperation were floated. And then, August 10th, 2019. He was found dead in his jail cell. Official ruling, suicide. But the circumstances? Malfunctioning cameras, guards asleep, previous suicide watch, broken bones in the neck that some medical experts debated. And suddenly, the story stopped moving forward. No trial, no testimony, no cross-examination, no public unraveling of elite networks. Just silence. And silence is dangerous when trust is already fragile. Now here's the uncomfortable part. If Epstein had information implicating powerful people, billionaires, politicians, royalty, executives, then even the possibility of him cooperating changes the stakes. Because cooperation shifts power from the accused to the one talking. And Epstein, for the first time, was in a position where talking could benefit him. That's why the public keeps circling this question. Who would have something to lose? Now, this doesn't mean someone orchestrated anything. There's no verified evidence proving that. But when a man connected to global elites dies before trial, speculation becomes inevitable because accountability feels incomplete. And when accountability feels incomplete, trust collapses. This is why the Epstein story won't die. It doesn't feel finished. Trials expose systems. Testimony reveals patterns. Cross-examination clarifies timelines. But none of that happened. Instead, the case froze. And the documents, the files, the logs, the emails, are being released in fragments, drip by drip. Each release triggers another wave of scrutiny, another name trending, another institution answering questions, but never the full picture. Now think about this. If Epstein was just one rogue predator, why did he have access to so many powerful rooms? Why did he have unexplained wealth? Why were doors reopened after 2008? Why did institutions continue engaging with him? These aren't accusations. They're systemic questions. And that's what makes this bigger than one person. Because if Epstein was a middleman, who was the ecosystem around him? Who normalized him? Who benefited from proximity? Who dismissed red flags? And here's the hardest question of all. If he had lived to testify, what would we know today? Would powerful reputations look different? Would institutions face deeper consequences? Would trust be further shattered? We'll never know. And that uncertainty is fuel. It fuels conspiracy. It fuels distrust. It fuels suspicion around every powerful name that appears in a document, including names like Oprah Winfrey, when they trend in conversations sparked by people like Joe Rogan. Not because there's proof, but because the trial never happened. And without a trial, narratives compete. Official conclusion versus public doubt. Headline versus intuition. Closure versus curiosity. And curiosity is powerful, because once people believe elite systems protect themselves, every incomplete answer feels intentional. Now here's where we land this. Maybe Epstein was one manipulative predator who exploited elite vanity. Maybe institutions failed due diligence. Maybe powerful people were careless, not criminal. Or maybe the system protects its own more than we want to admit. That's part 5. Because this isn't just about Epstein, it's about elite culture, reputation shields, and whether accountability actually reaches the top. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. This story isn't powerful because of one man. It's powerful because of what it reveals about the system. Jeffrey Epstein didn't operate in isolation. He operated in elite ecosystems, rooms filled with billionaires, presidents, scientists, media icons, royalty, tech founders, academics, cultural gatekeepers. And that's what makes this so unsettling. Because predators don't survive that long without social oxygen. They need access, they need protection, they need normalization. Now here's the uncomfortable reality. Elite culture is small. Influence overlaps constantly. Power clusters. Money circulates in tight circles. And once you're inside that circle, reputation becomes currency. That's what Joe Rogan was really pointing at. Not, here's proof of wrongdoing. But, why does power insulate itself so effectively? Why do wealthy institutions accept controversial donors? Why do social circles continue engaging with figures long after red flags are public? Why does accountability feel selective? Because when powerful names appear in documents, whether it's a tech billionaire, a politician, or someone like Oprah Winfrey trending in online discussions, the reaction isn't just curiosity, it's distrust. Not necessarily guilt, distrust. Distrust in how elite networking works, distrust in how reputations are built, distrust in how scandals are managed. And here's the deeper fear. What if Epstein wasn't the mastermind? What if he was the connector, the middleman, the broker, the social architect who understood that proximity to power is power? If you can get respected people into the same room, you inherit legitimacy. If Nobel Prize winners attend your dinner, you look credible. If celebrities accept invitations, you look normalized. If institutions take your money, you look rehabilitated. And once that illusion is built, the public stops questioning until it's too late. Now zoom out. The Epstein story doesn't linger because of one conviction. It lingers because of incomplete accountability. No full public trial. No cross-examinations of powerful associates. No systemic reckoning. Just fragments, documents, names, emails, and speculation filling the gaps. That vacuum is what fuels everything. And that's why every new file release feels explosive. Because it isn't just about one name appearing. It's about the pattern of proximity, the pattern of institutions reopening doors, the pattern of elite culture protecting access until public pressure forces separation. And this is where we land. Maybe Epstein was a manipulator who exploited elite vanity. Maybe powerful people were reckless but not criminal. Maybe institutions failed due diligence out of greed. Or maybe the system itself rewards silence. Because here's the truth, that makes people uneasy. Power rarely collapses itself. It protects itself. And when accountability stops at the surface, the public fills in the rest. That's why this conversation keeps coming back. That's why Rogan's comments went viral. That's why names trend instantly. Not because there's proven guilt, but because trust is fragile. And once trust cracks at the top, every association gets re-examined. So here's the real question. Is this about one scandal? Or is this about how elite networks function? Is this about individual wrongdoing? Or about a system that allows proximity without scrutiny? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think this is coincidence inside tight social circles? Or proof that elite culture protects its own? If you want deeper breakdowns like this, where we separate facts from speculation and unpack power structures, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this story, it's not over, and neither is the conversation. If this video made you question how power really works, hit that like button so more people see it. Comment below. Is this just elite networking, or is there something deeper going on? And if you want more breakdowns that go beyond headlines and actually unpack the system behind the story, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because the next file drop, it's going to be bigger.